Oh, I'm afraid this is the lecture where I have to burst my bubble, maybe your bubble a little bit. So I said earlier that where the ion is, where the element is, determines the charge on the periodic table. And it looks really hunky-dory, looks really easy, but several ions actually have a variable charge. So that means they can have more than one charge. And let me go ahead and give you a couple of these. So for instance, copper, Cu, that's Latin cuprum, hence Cu, can have a variable charge of either 1 positive or 2 positive, so rats. If we look at iron, iron can have a variable charge of 2 positive or 3 positive. In fact, you should know these. So know these. These are the only ones I expect you to know for sure what the 2 charges are in the whole course. But there are a bunch of other ones. So for instance, chromium. Chromium can be 2 positive or 3 positive. Lead can be 2 positive or 4 positive. And thallium, I said earlier, was actually positive 3, but actually it can also be positive 1. So these are ones that can have more than one charge. And if you wonder what do they all have in common, let me pull up my periodic table and show you. Well, they're all either in the center. So if I look at copper, so copper is right there, and iron is right there, and chromium is right here. So these are transition metal, and whenever you're in the transition or the inner transition, you almost always have a variable charge. That's not exactly true, but it's a pretty good bet. And then if we look at lead and thallium are down here, so they're not in the transition metal block. But what I typically find is that if you're in the transition metal block, or you're in the inner transition metal block, or you're down here, then you have to worry. So if it's transition metal, it can be variable. And these guys here, one phrase we use a lot for these are the heavy metals. So heavy, you can think of, they have a high atomic mass, and you can also think of them as sinking to the bottom of the periodic table. So all these things down here, right, I wouldn't bet on. So if someone said, what's the charge on osmium, I would have to say, I have no idea, let me look it up. Or if someone said, what's the charge on element 113, I have to say, gosh, that's a heavy metal. Yeah, I think I want to check in my encyclopedia of ions to figure out that one. So be aware, if you have them in the non-main group elements or very low down in the heavy metal block, then you really can't be sure as to their charges. So be aware.